Now, last week on the show, we talked to students, teachers, and a school psychologist about how to protect students. This week, we're talking policy, and joining us from the North Carolina General Assembly, we have two people who know a lot about this subject. We have Representative Linda Johnson. Representative Johnson has served 9 terms in the House, and she was recently appointed to the House Select Committee on School Safety that will hold its first meeting next week. We have, and then next to her, we have Senator Chaudhuri. Jay is in his first term in the Senate, Democrat, representing Wake County. Jay, before he was in the North Carolina Senate, actually spent several years in the Attorney General's office working on issues of school safety. So we appreciate both of you coming on.
Thank you.
Representative Johnson, I want to ask you first, because you're actually on the committee for the vehicle that changes and proposals might come on. I mentioned at the top of the show, Florida just passed a bill. Governor signed into law. This is a state that is even more sort of Republican conservative than North Carolina. You've got same numbers in the legislature. You have Rick Scott, the governor. They raised the age for purchasing rifles from 18 to 21, passed some other things. Do you think that that's going to happen? Do you think that is something that we should explore in North Carolina? And would you, as a representative, support an effort, to raise the age for guns like the AR-15?
Well, first, North Carolina is different. We are Southern, and we are in the Southern regional area. But in our charge for our school safety committee, there was no mention of that, although we do have justice and public safety in that committee. The committee was charged with doing surveillance and different types of training. And in 2011, we began working on school safety. And in 2013, we passed legislation. That has been 4 years. That's enough evidence to prove whether something is working or not. And I think we're going to take that data and try to figure out what is best and how to improve on the legislation that we already have.
Right. Now, Speaker Moore set the committee up. So, is it, you mentioned the charge in the first meeting. I'm guessing, though, that it's going to be up to the committee to sort of decide, sort of looking at everything across the board. So what should we do as a state? I mean, is there, or are you saying that there are sort of some things that are already off the table, I guess?
I think anything is subject to discussion because it's going to be inclusive of public and our government entities and the general public and our teachers, of course. And that will be going on during the committee. It is a long-term committee. At the press conference, we tried to stress that. We have very little time to get in for short session.
Right, that's right.
And in 2013, the governor established a committee, and he included all types: mental health, health and human services, and the public safety.
Right.
And they have data also. So I'm sure we'll be going through all of that data to figure out what is possible to help our students.
Well, let me get to you, Senator Chaudhuri. And I do want to talk about mental health and the other pieces of it, but I do want to go back to the gun piece because you've been out there. You were participating in some of the rallies here in Raleigh. You think that the issue of access to guns ought to be considered in the mix of everything else?
I do, but to your larger question, I mean, I think the comprehensive approach, if you look at the emergency management response to a critical incident like a school shooting, should focus on prevention, intervention, and the response to a school shooting. I think when we talk about prevention, it's hard to not talk about prevention without discussing access to guns. And so to your question, yes, I think that should be part of what the committee focuses on, and I think it should be part of a larger debate that we're having here in the state.
Right. Representative Johnson, you've been a long time friend of public schools, worked in public education issues. You know, we've talked about things like school counselors and school psychologists. Do you think that's something that the committee and the General Assembly ought to look at to say, like, we talked about this last week, we have one school psychologist for every 2,000 students, which is about 3 times the recommended average. that could be something that there could be some bipartisan support, right?
Yes, I visited with a psychologist 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. There seems to be a large problem in getting psychologists in the school system. Even though our number is high, we do not have that many.
Right.
We addressed almost all educator related salaries in the last General Assembly, but we did not change their salary.
Right.
That being because we don't truly understand it. It works with Health and Human Services and federal monies, and that needed more work.
Right. Well, let me ask you, Senator Chaudhuri, I want to ask you about the building on that, but what else should we be doing? You've studied this before. Is it about hardening the schools? Are there things we can do that way? Arming teachers has been floated, arming volunteers. I mean, what do you think we should be doing?
Well, I think one area where there's common ground is to focus on the mental health initiative. President Trump has talked about that. I think it's something that the committee's talked about. You talked about the school psychologist ratio of one psychologist for every 2,000 students. It should be a 1 at 750.
Right.
We should make sure that we've got counselors, more school counselors in every school building in the state. We need to have more school nurses. That's what we can do on the mental health side. Certainly on the response side, as Representative Johnson mentioned, we have the Center for Safer Schools at the Department of Public Instruction. I don't think that they have done an update on the number of school resource officers that we have in schools across the state, so it would be good to get that information up to date so we can focus on making sure that we have school resource officers on the response side. And then I would say on the intervention prevention side, I'm obviously looking at some common sense gun measures. I think the one area where we've seen a lot of overlap between conservatives and progressives is this idea of the extreme risk protective order, which essentially would allow a family or a friend who believes that someone is in imminent danger of being a threat to someone, bringing that information to a judge who can make a decision as to whether to remove the gun from them.
We're almost out of time. It always goes by fast. But I do want to ask both of you real quick. Do you think the idea of arming teachers is something we should look at in North Carolina?
I do think that it's true that we should have guns in school, but they should be through a program that is established through North Carolina and should be an option for school boards,
What do you
not
think, Jay?
mandatory.
I mean, as a general rule, I don't think that's where we need to have our conversation on protecting schools. As you mentioned in your opening comments, 78% of teachers think that's a bad idea, and I think we should look at school resource officers and other efforts in protecting schools outside of arming.
Thank
But
you,
you know,
Bruce.
Keith, we already have guns there. We have them with the SROs,
Right.
school resource officers.
Well, I appreciate both of you coming in and talking to us about
Quite
it. A lot going on. School walkout day this week, big rally next week, and your committee meeting. So we're looking forward to. And thanks for coming on. We'll have you back on to talk more about it as we move forward.
Well,
So
thank you
thanks
for
so
what
much.
you do for education.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. All right, when we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the Department of Public Instruction and its role in school safety, and also talk to a researcher about what some districts are doing already. As we go to break, see if you can answer this question. True or false, in North Carolina, it is illegal to carry guns inside of any school, public or private, unless you're law enforcement or campus security.